In Montana, a murdered woman is found stuffed in the trunk of her car. With little physical evidence to go on, investigators struggle to catch her killer. A seemingly healthy 33-year-old woman dies in her sleep. Tennessee police must determine if her death resulted from natural causes or murder. In Ohio, a woman abandons her husband and 2 children. But a routine investigation reveals that her disappearance may not have been intentional. A well-executed homicide can baffle even the most skilled investigator. But forensic examiners look beyond the obvious to find proof of a killer's guilt and expose the elements of murder. Settled in the heart of Big Sky country, the city of Great Falls, Montana is surrounded by the majestic Rocky Mountains to its west and the Little Belt Mountains to its east. On an October morning, a man hiking along the secluded banks of the Missouri River stumbled upon several ID cards. They belonged to a young woman. Concerned, he alerted police. Deputies from the Cascade County Sheriff's Department responded to the call. At the river's edge, they found additional ID cards belonging to the woman.
Susan Galloway.
Police were familiar with the name. 27-year-old Susan Galloway had been reported missing the previous day. Unsure what to make of the findings, officers from the boat patrol were called in to drag the river. 20 feet from shore, they signaled they had snagged a woman's purse. Inside were more of the missing woman's ID and credit cards.
What'd you find?
There was also $100 in cash. But there were no signs of Susan Galloway. Cascade County Police contacted the missing woman's parents and brought them in for an interview. The family was alarmed when they discovered that their daughter and her vehicle were gone. Susan had recently become engaged, and she seemed so happy.
Would tell me anything.
Her fiancé, Craig Smith, was stationed at the nearby Air Force Base.
You did pretty good.
The couple often helped out at the business that the Galloways owned. Susan was a devout Mormon. And though Craig wasn't, he had agreed to convert so the two could marry. The family planned to give the couple ownership of the store as a wedding present. They couldn't understand why Susan would just take off without a word. Veteran detective Ken Anderson was not optimistic.
Well, finding the identification indicated that Susan Galloway did not, in fact, just leave town or drive away in her vehicle without saying goodbye and that sort of thing, because she certainly wouldn't have left her identification and money behind.
Police arranged to interview the missing woman's fiancé.
Hello, are you Craig Smith? Yes, sir.
Craig Smith had no idea where Susan could have gone. He last saw her the night before she disappeared. After leaving a dinner party, Susan dropped him off at his apartment around midnight. He hadn't heard from her since. The detective was curious about a bandage on Smith's hand.
What happened to your hand?
He explained that he had accidentally cut himself with a knife. A few hours after Susan dropped him off, he woke up thirsty. He tried to open a frozen can of orange juice, but was having trouble. He grabbed a knife, but it slipped as he tried to pry open the can. His car wasn't running, and he walked to the Air Force base where he was stationed to have a medic treat the wound. Police later confirmed he had visited the medic that evening. The search for Susan Galloway was going nowhere. Three days later, a power company employee working at the Rainbow Dam spotted something on a hill across the river. He decided to go check it out. When he arrived at the spot, he found a car that had plunged down the hillside. The vehicle appeared to be caught up on some brush. Police and crime scene technicians were contacted and responded to the scene. A check on the vehicle's tags revealed the car was registered to missing 27-year-old Susan Galloway.
Watch for evidence.
Sergeant Anderson made his way down the hill. Through the window, he observed a key in the ignition. There didn't appear to be anyone inside. But on the back of the vehicle, he noticed streaks of blood. There was also what appeared to be a footprint on the trunk. Then Anderson took a closer look inside the car.
The rear cushion of the back seat had pulled away from the trunk area, and at that point in time I could see a body inside the trunk of the car.
The woman matched the description of Susan Galloway, and it appeared she had been murdered. Police towed up the vehicle and began searching for clues. Inside the car, technicians found large blood smears on the front passenger seat. They also recovered several shards of broken green glass stained with blood. The exterior of the vehicle was thoroughly photographed. The victim's body was transported to the medical examiner's office for autopsy. The lack of evidence found near the car led police to believe that she had been murdered elsewhere and then brought to the hillside. A dog was brought in to track the victim's scent. A mile from the car, he alerted to a partially dug hole.
Sergeant Anderson, SNR 4, come on up. I think we have a crime scene.
More of the victim's blood was found. It appeared the suspect brought the woman to this spot, finished the kill, and then attempted to bury the victim, but for some reason gave up. The medical examiner confirmed the victim was in fact Susan Galloway. Pieces of green glass from a 16-ounce soda bottle were found embedded in her skull and neck. They had severed her carotid artery, and as a result, Susan had bled to death. Now, detectives had to find out who had murdered Susan Galloway and why. But with few clues and no obvious suspects, they knew it would not be easy. Police in Great Falls, Montana had few clues in the murder of 27-year-old Susan Galloway. The young woman had been brutally beaten with a soda bottle, placed in the trunk of her car, and then sent down a steep embankment. No usable prints were found on the glass or in the victim's vehicle. Hoping to identify a suspect, investigators released details of the crime through the media. A short while later, they got a tip.
He knocked on my door.
A man stationed at the local Air Force base believed he had information.
Asked me,
About what time did he come to the room there?
He said that on the night Susan disappeared, he had seen her fiancé, Craig Smith.
about 2 in the morning.
Smith had come by the barracks in the early morning hours.
What's up? I was out with the guys.
He noticed his friend was carrying a bundle of dirty clothing.
I was out with some guys.
What's wrong with your hand?
He also noticed a gash on Smith's hand.
Listen, man, I was out with a girl. And
Smith
I don't
told him he had cut it with a knife. He was on his way to see the medic for treatment and asked his friend for a ride home after that was done. Smith had also told the airman that he had been out drinking with friends and got stranded.
He had,
In fact, he asked his friend to keep the story quiet because his fiancée, Susan Galloway, wouldn't have been happy about it.
been left at the bars.
The airman's story contradicted Craig Smith's claim that on the night of the disappearance he had gone to bed soon after Susan had dropped him off. Sergeant Ken Anderson was suspicious.
It was almost as though Craig was lying about something, and all of a sudden he became the main suspect rather than the grieving fiancé.
Police looked to corroborate Smith's story.
Saying there was no trace of orange.
They located the medic who had bandaged his cut hand.
And this was about that long.
He confirmed that Craig Smith had come in to be treated for a cut in the early morning hours of October 23rd.
approximately how big was it?
But the medic recalled thinking that the wound was consistent with having been caused by a jagged edge rather than a knife blade, as Smith suggested.
It was fairly deep.
Though incriminating, the information fell short of proving that Craig Smith was a killer. Now, looking to tie the suspect to the crime scene, police canvassed the nearby
I
area.
just have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind.
A clerk at a convenience store remembered seeing Smith and Susan Galloway the night she disappeared. And according to the clerk, they seemed to be arguing when they came into the store. They bought a few bottles of soda and then left.
We're going now.
The clerk showed the officer the type of soda purchased by the couple. They were 16-ounce bottles made of green glass, identical to the glass that had killed Susan Galloway. The information was enough for police to obtain a warrant to search Craig Smith's residence. The suspect continued to deny any involvement in Susan's death.
And with the sheriff's office, this is Ken Anderson. We have a
He admitted he and Susan had been in the convenience store that night. And he also admitted that in the past, he had hung out at the area where her car was later found.
And
But Smith denied ever being at the spot where the partially dug hole was found.
Caesar. What else? Where are
The
they?
place police believe was the kill site.
Are these your corduroy pants?
Detectives collected the clothing he wore on the night of Susan's disappearance.
Is that yours too?
Yes, that is.
We'll be taking those with us.
But the items had been recently cleaned.
Is there a shirt in there also, Ken?
Police realized their only hope would be to link Smith to the sneaker print recovered from the trunk of Susan's car. They collected a single pair of muddy shoes.
Craig, you can go inside.
An examination revealed that the shoes seized from Craig Smith were the same size and the soles had the same pattern as those collected from the vehicle. But that alone wouldn't be enough to prove murder.
He had driven her car a number of times. His footprint was in an irregular place on the trunk, but it could have been there.
Police would have to physically place him at the kill site. And all they had to do that was some dirt on the bottom of Smith's shoes.
And it was our belief that if he had been standing in the area of the kill site, he would have picked up soil. It was very sandy and totally different from the mud and soil at the area where the car was pushed over.
Investigators collected soil samples from various locations where the suspect claimed to have been on the night of Susan's disappearance. They also collected samples from the spot where they believed the murder took place. All of the soil was sent to the University of Montana for analysis. There, geologist and mineralogist Jack Warenberg worked the case.
I was to examine crime scene soils, and there was a open burial site, and there were several other small areas that they wanted to be checked out to compare the soil that was present on the suspect's shoe.
Warenberg observed that the soil samples taken from the bottom of Smith's shoe contained tiny pieces of glass, probably from broken bottles. A microscopic analysis also revealed that the sample contained bits of ash that were consistent with having been produced by copper. The samples collected from Craig Smith's yard and from the path he had walked to the base had no such ash. In fact, only samples taken from the crime scene had both the tiny shards of glass and the copper ash. And the reason seemed simple. A few hundred yards from the crime scene, on the banks of the Missouri River, was the site of a copper smelting plant. Warenberg determined that it was the only area in the county where copper ash appears in the soil. Craig Smith had been at the kill site, something he had previously denied. When confronted with the evidence against him, Craig Smith admitted to killing his fiancée. He said he wanted the Galloway family business, but had no interest in being married to Susan. He was charged with first-degree murder. Based on the information, police believe that on the night of the murder, the couple got into a heated argument. Then, Craig Smith viciously attacked his fiancée. He then dragged her to a secluded spot to finish the job and bury his victim. But when that didn't work, he placed her in the trunk of her car and attempted to send the vehicle over the cliff. Craig Smith was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 100 years in prison. A patch of soil was enough for Montana police to expose a killer's dirty secret. But in Tennessee, detectives must look beyond the obvious in order to find answers to explain a mysterious death. In the early morning of December 23, 1997, Nashville police and emergency workers responded to a frantic 911 call. Terry Robinson said his wife had been violently ill for several days, and now she wasn't breathing. She was pronounced dead at the scene. With no obvious cause of death, detectives were dispatched to the home as a matter of routine.
Well,
Homicide detective E.J. Bernard was assigned the case. 33-year-old Lenora Robinson lay dead on the couple's bed. Investigators noticed a black substance on the woman's shirt and on the pillowcase that seemed to have come from the victim's mouth and nose. It didn't appear to be blood. Perhaps they thought it had originated from a cigarette found next to Lenora's bed. They also found and collected a bottle of Gatorade and a glass filled with the orange liquid. Terry Robinson told the detective that Lenora had been suffering from severe flu-like symptoms for the past 4 or 5 days. In fact, the day before, Terry had taken his wife to a doctor for treatment for a high fever and uncontrollable vomiting and diarrhea. The physician who examined Lenora diagnosed her with a bad case of the flu. He gave her an injection to relieve the symptoms and sent her home. Terry said that Lenora seemed better for a while, but that night her symptoms worsened. He tried to nurse her, giving her Gatorade and medications. But when he checked on her the following morning, she wasn't breathing. Though there were no signs suggesting foul play, police were troubled that someone as young as Lenora would die from the flu. Detective Bernard ordered that an autopsy be performed.
The initial assumption was that it was something to do with the flu or the shot, or possibly a heart attack, brain tumor, something totally unknown to the family members or anyone, the medical personnel on the scene.
Her body was transported to the Tennessee State Medical Examiner's office located in Nashville. There, Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Bruce Levy performed the autopsy. The thick black substance that had come from Lenora Robinson's nose immediately caught his attention.
Well, in this case, the first thing was there had been noticed some black residue on the pillow next to where her mouth had been, which means that something had come out of her body. We weren't sure exactly what it was.
An internal examination uncovered evidence of a heart condition and congested lungs, supporting the idea that Lenora had died of natural causes. Then, Detective Bernard arrived to view the autopsy. He noticed something unusual.
It smells like almonds or candy.
It does.
It was the smell of bitter almonds coming from the body. It was an odor associated with people who have died as a result of cyanide poisoning. Further examination, however, failed to turn up the telltale signs associated with cyanide ingestion. There was no liver damage and no signs of burning in the mouth or esophagus. Toxicology tests on the Gatorade found near Lenora's bed turned up negative for poison. If the 33-year-old woman had been exposed to cyanide, the question now was how and by whom. An autopsy performed on 33-year-old Lenora Robinson led authorities in Nashville, Tennessee, to believe her death had resulted from exposure to cyanide. To prove it, additional tests would have to be performed. The medical examiner collected blood, tissue, and urine samples. The items were then forwarded to forensic toxicologists. To test for the presence of poison, the samples are mixed with chemicals that react to cyanide. If the poison is present, it will turn a bluish-purple color within a few minutes. The tissue samples turned up negative. But Lenora's blood and urine tested positive for the poison. For cyanide to be absorbed in the blood, but not in the tissue, it would have had to have been inhaled. And according to forensic expert Agent Louis Kuykendall, cyanide is most lethal in a mist-like state.
Typically, the person will have convulsions, the person will have stomach distress, but usually very quickly, 30 seconds to maybe 2 minutes, they're into a coma state and then die very rapidly.
Medical examiner Bruce Levy contacted police with the findings.
It's Bruce. Yeah, I have the results on the toxicology on Lenora Robinson. It is positive for cyanide.
But until police could rule out that the poisoning was accidental or suicide, the manner of death would remain undetermined. Detective E.J. Bernard was quickly able to rule out both of those scenarios.
There was no suicide notes. I learned that she would have died within minutes of ingesting the cyanide. Therefore, she would have left something close by. There was nothing close by. Mr. Robinson assured me that he did not clean anything up.
Stormy.
Police believed Lenora Robinson had been murdered. To find out why, they questioned the victim's mother and stepfather. Both agreed that the marriage had been rocky for some time. According to Lenora's mother, the couple suffered from severe financial problems.
Pay these bills with no money in the account.
The small business that they owned and operated together was not doing well,
A credit card. You're supposed to know.
and the bills continued to pile up.
You gotta pay for it somehow.
It had caused a lot of anger and resentment between Terry and Lenora.
Shall we? Let's see, we've got last year.
Lenora, they said, had recently begun talking about the possibility of divorce.
I will be talking to the two of you in the next trip that they have.
They had one more piece of information to add. Terry, they said, had once worked as an exterminator, and as part of his job, he had worked with deadly poisons.
He didn't have but a couple because before they married, he had.
Before obtaining a warrant to search Terry Robinson's home, police needed to know if it was possible for him to create cyanide vapor.
You'll actually see it in some of the pesticides, industrial pesticides especially. And so
Agent Kuykendall confirmed that the process is relatively simple.
you might go ahead and collect that.
He gave police a list of items to look out for. Armed with a warrant, police returned to Terry Robinson's home. The suspect maintained his innocence. But as Detective Bernard began sifting through the couple's financial papers, he uncovered a letter Lenora had written to her husband. In it, she threatened him with a bitter and costly divorce. With a list of chemicals that could be used to transform cyanide into vapor, Detective Bernard searched the suspect's garage. There, he found several common household items that could have been used. He also collected numerous containers of unidentified liquid. At the TBI crime lab, Agent Kuykendall began analyzing the substances collected from the home. But the results were not what investigators had hoped for.
Essentially what EJ found and sent to me, none of those had cyanide or enough cyanide at any level that if someone was to ingest it or get them on, that it should harm them.
The investigation was back to square one. To make their case, police would have to rely on the circumstantial evidence. And their best bet would be to prove that the suspect had access to cyanide. Detectives contacted Terry Robinson's former employer at the extermination company where he had worked years earlier.
I need your help.
The man confirmed that while Robinson worked there, the company utilized cyanide. In fact, Terry Robinson helped convert the crystallized poison into a liquid state, which would then be administered with a mister to combat insects and rodents.
Oh, that stuff smells.
The former employer hadn't seen Terry in some time and wasn't aware of any poison he may have taken with him when he left the company.
That's all there is to it.
Sure.
Still, Detective E.J. Bernard refused to give up.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you very much. Well, I continued looking for the magic bean, we'll say, to where I could get a receipt where he bought cyanide. I was unable to locate that.
Though police had established motive and opportunity, they had no hard evidence linking Terry Robinson to the poison that was used to murder his wife. And without that, Lenora's murder threatened to remain unsolved. Forensic toxicologists in Nashville, Tennessee, had exposed the poisoning death of 33-year-old Lenora Robinson as a homicide. But so far, they had been unable to link her husband, Terry Robinson, to the cyanide gas used to kill her. But then they got the break they needed. Lenore Robinson's great-uncle came in to speak with police.
A few questions, if you don't mind. I believe your name is Roy Blanton.
He recalled that some time ago, Terry had asked for his help in killing wasps that had nested near his home.
Did he pay you for this?
Good to see you. Hi, what we got here?
The uncle agreed and came by the house to give Terry several insecticides and poisons.
One way or the other. Right. Need anything else?
Among the items were cyanide tablets.
Good. Job below. I'll run for it. Sounds good. Anything.
Though the evidence was circumstantial at best, police were able to obtain a warrant for the arrest of
Has
Terry
he talked to you
Robinson.
about any of these chemicals?
On June 30th, police returned to his home and took him into custody. Terry Robinson was charged with the first-degree murder of his wife, Lenora. Based on the evidence, police believe that Terry Robinson took advantage of Lenora's illness to free himself from an unhappy marriage, heavy debt, and an impending divorce. On December 22nd, he made his way into her bedroom and administered the deadly poison. On October 15th, 1999, 49-year-old Terry Robinson was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 51 years in prison. To trap a killer and make their case, police in Nashville had to rely on both hard science and dogged determination. But some predators have an intimate knowledge of law enforcement tactics, and outwitting them can be a difficult challenge. With a population of less than 8,000 residents, Belpre, Ohio is regarded as a friendly, tight-knit community. And when someone goes missing, it's everyone's business. On September 19, 1996, Jack McCready came in to speak with Belpre police. Investigators knew him well. McCready was a respected officer with the Ohio State Police. And now he wanted to report that his wife Jennifer had disappeared. He said he last saw his wife that morning as they were getting ready to go to work. Jack said he hadn't noticed anything unusual about her behavior that morning. Though their marriage had its problems, he thought things had improved.
There you go.
Thanks.
All right, I really got to get
He later learned that Jennifer never showed up to work that day. Jack suspected his wife had been having an affair, and now he feared she had taken off with another man, leaving him with the couple's 2 children. Detective Dave Garvey agreed.
When he got home, the first thing he saw was Jennifer's wedding band on the kitchen counter. He checked the house and found out that there were certain items of hers missing, luggage was missing, and the photographs was missing.
Though police had no reason to suspect foul play, they agreed to look into the case. They began by questioning the McCrady's neighbors. One believed he had seen Jennifer leaving the house that morning. Around 10 a.m., he saw Jennifer's Blazer back out of the driveway and screech down the street in an erratic manner. The neighbor admitted that he never actually saw Jennifer's face.
Okay.
But he knew the Blazer was her
I
car,
haven't seen her since.
and he had never seen anyone else drive it.
All right, thank you.
Then, a few days later, police received a call that a vehicle matching Jennifer's Blazer had been located in a parking lot. Jack McCrady was dispatched to the scene, and he confirmed that it was in fact his wife's car. Investigators searched the vehicle's interior. They found no obvious signs of a struggle or any indications of foul play. Still, the vehicle was impounded for a more thorough analysis. Crime scene technicians scoured the vehicle using luminol, a chemical that can detect invisible traces of blood and other biological evidence. But after hours of processing, the examination revealed nothing to suggest that a crime had taken place. As an adult, Jennifer McCrady had the right to be missing. And having found no evidence that she had met with foul play, Belpre police had no choice but to give up on their search for the young mother of 2. Detectives in Belpre, Ohio had found nothing to suggest that the missing wife of State Police Officer Jack McCrady had met with foul play.
Yes.
All indications suggested the 30-year-old mother of 2 had simply packed up and left town.
The vehicle that's out there now.
But then, friends of the missing woman contacted police. They were concerned something bad had happened to Jennifer McCrady. Jennifer, they said, was dedicated to her children. They were her life. No one who knew her could believe that she would just walk out on her children. And no one believed she was having an affair, as Jack McCrady suggested. But Jennifer had been talking about divorcing her possessive and jealous husband. Then, a witness came forward with information. She said that around the time of Jennifer's disappearance, she saw a police vehicle driving in a remote area a few miles outside of town. The officer fit the description of Jack McCrady to a T. The woman had provided unreliable information in the past, and at first, Detective Dave Garvey didn't believe this would be any different. But when no additional leads surfaced, detectives decided to drive out to the secluded spot where the woman had seen the patrol car. There, they found something that seemed out of place.
What we can do is...
It was a dirt mound. They shoveled away a few inches of dirt and hit a vinyl cloth. That was followed by the unmistakable smell of death. Crime scene technicians were quickly dispatched to the scene. As the excavation continued, the team unearthed a comforter and a sleeping bag. And wrapped inside were decomposed remains, the head covered with a white plastic trash bag. When the bag was removed, one of the officers identified the female as Jennifer McCready.
What we want to do now is...
She was wearing pajamas. That was at odds with her husband's claim that when he last saw her, she was dressed and leaving for work. As a matter of routine, soil samples were collected from the makeshift grave. Technicians collected the bedding and the sleeping bag for a more detailed analysis. The victim was transported to the medical examiner's office for autopsy. The medical examiner determined that Jennifer McCready had died as a result of a gunshot wound to her head. The fatal .357 Magnum bullet was collected and sent to the crime lab. Belpre investigators now had a homicide on their hands. The inconsistent information, in addition to witness testimony, pointed to State Police Officer Jack McCready as the prime suspect.
I've got some bad news for you, Jack.
Detectives arranged to speak with him at the barracks where he was stationed.
You understand?
When they broke the news about Jennifer's death, he was visibly shaken.
You guys as a family, at this point...
But as they began to
I think
question
it'd
him,
be best,
McCready asked for an attorney and ended the interview. Soon after, Jack McCready was put on leave. Investigators hoped the forensic evidence could tell them more. All of the items collected from the crime scene were sent to the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Lab for analysis. While processing the evidence, criminalist Michelle Yezo discovered dozens of synthetic fibers. She also located strands of fiberglass clinging to the inside of the sleeping bag.
Finding the fiberglass insulation within that sleeping bag was something that was very unusual in my opinion, because that would be very itchy. And because of that, that's not something that you would want to have in that sort of context.
Police obtained a warrant to search the McCready home.
Let you look it over. Take a look at it.
In the bedroom, they found linens that matched the comforter the victim had been buried in. Several fibers were also collected for comparison with those recovered from the crime scene. In the kitchen, police located a .357 Magnum revolver, the same type of gun used to kill Jennifer McCready. As the search continued, investigators found and collected newly installed fiberglass insulation in the couple's garage. The material appeared identical to the insulation found in the sleeping bag. Then they noticed another potential clue. There were numerous shovels, and some were coated with dirt. Though McCready explained that he had recently done work on his yard, police confiscated the tools. Now, forensic examiners began analyzing all of the evidence. Michelle Yezo found that the carpet fibers collected from the McCready home shared all the same microscopic characteristics as those recovered from the bedding that the victim had been buried in. All of the evidence suggested the victim was murdered in her own home. But none of it told them who had carried out the homicide. and their best chance of linking Jack McCready to the murder turned out to be a dead end. The gun barrel had been bored out, making ballistic comparisons nearly impossible. Police had underestimated Jack McCready.
I don't see anything in there that says that it was...
The suspect had been clever enough to tamper with the one piece of evidence that could directly tie him to the murder. Or so he thought. Police contacted Richard Bisbing, a forensic microscopist with the private firm of McCrone Associates. He was asked to compare soil samples that were collected from the gravesite, Jack McCready's shovel, and from the suspect's yard.
We analyze soil samples by doing a side-by-side careful comparison of all the details that we can find in the soil itself. The soil differs by color and by the presence of plant material. It differs by its mineral content. It differs by its texture, the particle sizes in the soil grains themselves. And all of those features are compared.
Bisbing began his analysis by comparing the soil taken from McCready's shovel to samples taken from his yard. But the texture, size, color, and mineral composition of the two samples did not match. But when he compared the soil from the gravesite with the soil taken from the shovel, he found one consistency after another.
We could conclude that the soil from the shovel was similar to the gravesite and could have originated from the gravesite. And we were able to show that the place of the gravesite was different in its soil classification even from the place where the defendant lived, and the soil was different than most places in the county.
A short while later, Ohio State Police Officer Jack McCready was placed under arrest and charged with the murder of his wife, Jennifer.
233.
Though police remain unsure what drove him to murder, the evidence suggests that on the evening of September 18th, Jack McCready shot Jennifer one time in the head. To cover up his actions, he buried her in a remote spot, returned home, and altered the barrel of his gun. Despite his efforts, Jack McCready was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Some killers will go to extraordinary lengths to distance themselves from their deeds. But no crime is perfect. And sometimes, investigators must rely on a few molecules in order to piece together the elements of murder. A St. Louis teacher collapses in front of her class. Her organs are shutting down, and her students are panicked. Frantic doctors struggle to uncover the source of her mysterious condition. But science makes a shocking revelation. What once was thought an illness is now believed to be a crime. In Columbus, Ohio, a woman is found shot in the head. The death is ruled a suicide. But something is not right, and detectives refuse to let the matter rest. To find answers, investigators must decipher a pattern, unraveling the mystery that leads to murder. The meticulous work of forensic experts can often find even the smallest traces left by a killer and put an end to their murderous attraction. In this episode, some of the names have been changed. September 26, 1993, St. Louis, Missouri. Donna Boley, a 7th grade math teacher and mother of 2 teenaged sons, was in the middle of her lesson. She hadn't been feeling well all summer, but thought it was just the flu.
And Kenneth, let's move on down to number 9.
She hoped it would pass once the school year began.
Which one are you going to do first?
But it didn't. It got worse.
Hold on, what's...
She collapsed in front of her class. Alarmed students called for the principal. Paramedics arrived to find Donna struggling to breathe. They had no idea what was wrong with her or why she collapsed. Medics tried to stabilize her, but her body was shutting down. She was losing consciousness. Donna was fighting for her life. In the emergency room, doctors fought to save her. But it wasn't enough. Even with their best efforts, Donna was still struggling. She was now paralyzed, with no feeling in her arms and legs. She was immediately hooked up to a ventilator to help her breathe. Critical care specialist Dr. Gregory Becker.
We had no idea what was wrong with her. She had nonspecific symptoms. She developed numbness of the lower extremities, confusion, had a seizure. Their oxygen levels were dropping, and she appeared to have respiratory difficulties. We were baffled, really, with what was going on.
Jim Boley, Donna's husband, rushed to check on his wife. The attending doctors assured him they were doing everything possible, but the prognosis wasn't good. Donna was in critical condition. Jim told doctors Donna had been feeling ill, but it had never been this bad. Donna was in cardiac arrest. Doctors desperately tried to get her heart beating again.
All right, let's do it again. Turn it up higher, nurse. All right, here we go. And clear. 1, 2, 3.
She had a variety of symptoms that we couldn't pigeonhole in a single diagnosis.
Doctors stabilized Donna and took her to the ICU. But they still had no idea what was causing Donna's symptoms.
When we come to a situation like this where a patient is getting more and more ill, right in front of us is we'll shotgun a variety of tests.
But the test results showed nothing.
I'm gonna have to go to the side.
Jim stayed by his wife's side.
So you promise me you'll drink it all, okay?
He brought her flowers, cards, and her favorite milkshakes. He did everything he could to care for her. As the mysterious disease ravaged Donna's body, the search for the diagnosis continued.
One of the full battery of tests that we did was a urinary heavy metal screen. When it came back, her urinary excretion of arsenic was sky high, astronomical.
Donna's body was being poisoned.
Mr. Boley?
The amount of arsenic in her system was 420 times the normal amount.
Apparently, she has arsenic.
Why were the levels so high, and how did it get into her system?
Does she do any type of gardening?
Concerned others were exposed to the arsenic, doctors immediately informed Donna's family and also called police. Jim Boley told doctors he had no idea how this could have happened and wanted a full police investigation.
She was poisoned by someone.
Officers arrived at the hospital and interviewed doctors, nurses, and all those who cared for Donna. But no one had ever seen anything like this before. St. Louis County Police Detective Tony Grimmel was the lead investigator on the case.
I found out that from the hospital that Donna Boley's level of arsenic was right at the lethal dosage. and that she was on the fence and could possibly die.
Since arsenic poisoning is rare, Detective Grimmel needed to do research on the toxin.
I determined as much as I could about arsenic and found out that it is in pesticides and herbicides. It's also found in the environment, in well water.
Detective Grimmel had hoped to speak to Donna, but that would be impossible.
At that point in time, that not only was she in critical condition, but she was paralyzed from the neck down and unable to speak.
Unable to communicate with Donna, the detectives would have to find their answers another way. They asked hospital personnel to contact them if they came up with any new information. Nurses were stationed in Donna's room around the clock to monitor her condition.
Skin color? Okay.
Detective Grimmel's next step was to determine whether he was dealing with accidental exposure or something criminal.
This is the first type of arsenic case that I've ever been involved in. The questions that we didn't have answers to is, how did she get it in her system? What type of arsenic it was? Where it came from?
To find the answer, the detective turned to an expert at the St. Louis County Medical Examiner's office. He met with Chief Toxicologist Dr. Christopher Long.
Arsenic symptoms are so common and typical of like the flu or possibly food poisoning that most physicians tend to focus on that area to see if there's some sort of biological reason why you have these symptoms. And they don't really consider arsenic or heavy metal poisoning.
But arsenic poisoning is much worse than any flu. It attacks the body's red blood cells, eating away at them until the body completely shuts down.
Everybody has arsenic in their system, but in normally low levels that don't offer any symptoms or any problems.
But the levels in Donna's system suggested something else.
Due to the high levels, it appeared to be administered to her, either self-administered or administered by someone else.
Although environmental factors such as a tampered water supply were not ruled out, investigators had to look at all the possibilities, including attempted suicide or murder. Detectives visited the Boley home. Hoping to develop leads, investigators interviewed Donna's husband and her teenaged sons. Jim Boley said Donna had no history of depression. She never spoke about taking her own life and never attempted suicide. But the family mentioned Donna had trouble with several students who were angry with her over grades. Jim also said Donna had trouble with a teacher who used to work with her, and Donna was an easy target.
He felt that since she kept a cup of water on her desk at all times, that anybody at school could have administered the poison to her by dropping it into her glass or cup on her desk.
While at the house, investigators took a sample of the family's tap water. It was sent to the lab for analysis.
From what the boy said,
they collected canisters, jars, and utensils. Detectives also collected household products and cleaners. They were looking for anything that either contained arsenic, such as pesticides, or any kitchen items that may have been contaminated.
This was done to remove anything from the house that might make the children ill if there was any arsenic in it, and also to include or exclude any of these items as being used in poisoning of Donna.
In the bathroom, police found hypodermic needles. Jim told investigators the hypodermic needles were used by one of the boys for medication.
We're going to go ahead and take
they were taken with the other items to be tested.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks.
student.
Detective Grimmel went to the school to follow up on the family's suspicions. The principal said although Donna was often sick, she was in good spirits and was not depressed.
Deportment records.
He also told the detective the problems with the former co-worker and the angry students were not serious. And none of them had been at the school in months.
There's nothing negative in either of these children.
Grimmel now believed if Donna was poisoned, it did not happen at school. At the Identification Bureau of the St. Louis County Police Department, the household items were tested for arsenic. The syringes found in the Boley home were quickly ruled out. As the husband said, they were used for prescribed medication for one of the boys. And all the other tests came back negative. None of the household items contained the deadly poison. The water was also clean. Detective Grimmel was at an impasse, and there were no leads in sight.
I didn't believe that in a family of four, one person could have accidentally ingested a lethal amount of arsenic at home, and the others have no signs of arsenic in their system. So what I was looking at was self-inflicted, where it was an attempted suicide, or that it was used as a weapon in an attempt to kill her.
And the one person who could shed light on the investigation was the only person who wasn't talking. St. Louis schoolteacher Donna Boley collapsed in her classroom and was now lying in intensive care. High levels of arsenic were found in her system. Detectives believe Donna was either trying to kill herself or someone else was trying to kill her. After following up leads at both her school and her home, they came up empty. Detectives began asking questions. If someone wanted her dead, who could it be, and what was their motive?
She's pretty busy and stressed out at work.
They decided to look into the Boley family's financial records. It didn't take long before Detective Tony Grimmel found a life insurance policy on Donna, and it was recently increased from $200,000 to $600,000. And there was something else. Accounts showed that the family carried $20,000 in credit card debt. The case was heating up, and then Detective Grimmel received a call. It was Donna's nurse, and she was calling from the hospital. She said that despite intensive treatment to rid Donna's body of the poison, she was getting worse. And she said she noticed a pattern. After each of Jim Boley's visits, his wife suffered a relapse. Despite Donna's serious condition, Detective Tony Grimmel had to find a way to communicate with her.
She was paralyzed from the neck down, and she couldn't speak. Basically, all she could do was shake her head yes and no, and she had eye contact. She couldn't write because of her paralyzation. She looked pretty bad.
The detective needed to speak to Donna alone.
Even though Donna couldn't talk, she could communicate and made arrangements to communicate with her at the hospital. The hospital had been using a alphabet board in order to communicate with Donna. She could shake her head yes and no, so she could answer questions that required a yes and no answer, but if there was anything more specific, she had to spell it out using the alphabet board. The first thing I talked to Donna about was to see if she had administered this to herself, if she had attempted suicide, and she said she had not. I asked her a series of yes and no questions as much as I could. I asked her if she thought she got the poison at home. She indicated no. If she got it from friends, she indicated no.
Detective Grimmel didn't want to tire Donna, even though he still didn't get the answers he needed. He would have to come back.
As I started to leave, she started shaking her head no, started crying. I was concerned from, she was, I don't want to say frantic, but she was upset, clearly upset. I was afraid maybe she was in pain, having some problems. I called a nurse in to check with her. She said she didn't want me to leave, that she wasn't in pain, that there was something else I needed to know. And the first thing she spelled out for me was that she was afraid Jim, her husband, was involved. M? Jim? Is that your husband, Jim? Okay. Do you feel he's involved in this?
Slowly and painfully, nodding at each question and letter of the alphabet, Donna recalled a curious incident 2 months before.
M-I-L.
Have a good day.
It happened on a busy morning as the family was rushing through breakfast and Donna was preparing for her class. Jim Boley always did the cooking. It was his idea to take some of the burden off of his wife. He gave Donna a glass of milk to settle her stomach and reminded her to drink it. It was then Donna saw pink residue at the bottom of the glass. Donna's story placed her husband under suspicion. This, coupled with the recent increase in Donna's life insurance, made Jim Boley the prime suspect in his wife's poisoning. But investigators were a long way from proving he was trying to kill his wife. Detective Grimmel asked Donna for a hair sample. It was sent to the lab to establish a poison timeline. And there was one more thing, Jim's visits.
I called the hospital to tell them that Mr. Boley wasn't allowed to see his wife anymore. I contacted security and put a freeze on visits because I thought there was a possibility he was also administering some of this at the hospital. After my interview, I went out to the waiting room. The first thing he asked me was, "What did she tell you?" I told him that she told me a number of different things and that he and I were going to have to talk again, and we were going to have to talk at the police department.
More evidence surfaced when Donna's relatives discovered a gym bag hidden at the Boley home. They brought it to police. Detectives were puzzled by what they found inside. Other women's lingerie.
All in this bag, and I know that's not hers. And then there's these ads for escort services.
Ads for local escort services. Love notes.
He's maybe taking out some.
These notes, where'd you find these?
Contents also included photos of naked women and sexual paraphernalia.
And the bag was?
It was out in.
We obtained cell phone records and found out that he was using 2 dating services. And that he was using his cell phone for this.
At the toxicology lab of the St. Louis County Medical Examiner's Office, Donna's hair was tested. Hair grows about 1 inch a month, and because the arsenic attaches to the follicles and stays there, scientists can get an accurate timeline of the poisoning. Her hair provided answers to the questions when, how much, and for how long Donna was ingesting arsenic. Chief toxicologist Dr. Christopher Long performed an atomic absorption test.
The arsenic analysis, you can't see that because it's done on a molecular level, and you can't see the little molecules or electrons. The computer can determine the difference in the light absorption, print out a concentration, and it's all done on computer.
The results came in.
From her hair, we clearly showed that at the far end there was no arsenic. That was somewhere 5 or 6 months earlier. From that point on, the arsenic levels in her hair increased, and they increased dramatically every month, up till and including the time of her hospital admission. This would show that she had been exposed over a period of time, and the dose was being increased over that time.
The toxicologist reported his findings to investigators.
Well, it was really an opportunity to put the science to work, to show how toxicology is part of the picture And sometimes we can be a very important part of the picture in determining if somebody's a bad person or not.
Police asked Jim Boley to come in to answer questions.
Right here, Jim, this room here.
Jim Boley seemed to be the perfect husband. He worked as a high school counselor, coached baseball, and was a scout leader.
I told him that she was pointing the finger at him, and that he was now the prime suspect, and I advised him of his rights. He was more than willing to cooperate, and he tried to explain away the pink milk and her feeling that he was a suspect.
Well, she's got poison in her system.
Boley claimed that his wife's illness had caused her to have hallucinations.
She's confused. We got a wonderful situation.
Detectives asked him about the $600,000 insurance policy on Donna, about his financial difficulties, and about his extramarital affairs.
Somebody's trying to hurt her.
Talking for hours, Jim Boley seemed to have an answer for everything.
Trying to waste
But he explained those away, and he was good at explaining things away.
Boley's background was in psychology. He seemed in control. So detectives took a new approach.
Have you noticed throughout this thing that whenever he's talking, he's in control and as big as life, but when we talk, he shrinks back in his chair? Have you noticed that?
Yeah, he seems real confident and comfortable when he's talking, and
very uncomfortable when you're talking.
Right.
I think what we should do is go back in there and just hammer him and just get up on the podium and don't let him talk at all. Just give him everything you've got.
This time, they would be verbally aggressive and not let him redirect blame.
I've been listening to you all night long. Now it's time for you to listen to me.
Well, I think
No, wait a minute. I've listened to you all night.
Laying out the
Now
case
it's my
against
turn.
him,
You
investigators didn't let Boley answer for an hour and a half.
No, I'm doing the talking. At the end of all that, hour and a half or so, when he first did speak, he asked me, "How much time do you think I'm going to get?" Which in itself was a tacit admission, but not a confession.
After over 8 hours of questioning, investigators still couldn't get Boley to confess to poisoning his wife. With nothing solid to hold him, Detective Grimmel went to the district attorney. St. Louis prosecutor Bob McCullough had to make the decision.
Actually, we had very little evidence. It was one of those where you knew that the guy did it, but whether we were going to be able to prove it or not at that point was kind of up in the air.
But detectives wouldn't give up and continued to keep pressure on Boley to get a confession. But Jim Boley still wouldn't crack. And without stronger evidence, police feared the man they suspected of poisoning his wife would walk free. Someone was trying to kill Donna Boley. 420 times the lethal dose of arsenic was discovered in her system. And police believed they knew who was responsible. Donna's husband, Jim.
Is it the letter I?
Detectives were mounting a solid case against Jim Boley. They discovered he was patronizing sex services and bought a $600,000 life insurance policy on his wife.
Want to have a seat there?
Detectives brought Jim in for questioning, hoping to break him, but he had been
You know why we're
stonewalling
here?
them for hours.
Yeah. I want to talk about Donna, and would like you to tell us what happened to her.
Detective Tony Grimmel went to the prosecutor's office to try to get an arrest warrant.
You need to do the right thing, and you and I both know what that is. You know, look at yourself. Look at this place you're at now.
At the same time,
Why don't you tell me
Boley
what
finally confessed he had been poisoning Donna.
I didn't want to kill her. I only wanted to make her a little sick. You gotta believe me. I just wanted to make her a little sick. She was really stressed. It's been a long summer. And I thought
But he wouldn't admit he was trying to kill her.
Yes, the Lieutenant Barner over at the police department. Detective Grimmel's there applying on a warrant. Could I speak with him, please?
St. Louis Detective Tony
Grimmel.
Grimmel was seeking the arrest warrant.
Tony, Boley's over here confessing to Barra right now.
He used that for the reason of the poisoning, that he and his wife haven't had much quality time together. He wanted to make her sick so she would stay home from work, and he could burn up his sick time and stay home with her and care for her and have some quality time with her.
Jim Boley was taken into custody. He told investigators where he had hidden a box of rat poison in the house. He took police to the garden store where he purchased the poison.
Hi, glad you could come.
He even pointed out which brand he bought.
This is the product that you bought?
Yeah.
For months, Boley had carefully prepared potions of arsenic to feed to his unsuspecting wife. He told police he dissolved the poison in water before adding it to Donna's
guys.
food or drink.
Time to hit the bed.
Investigators asked police chemists to check Boley's story in the lab. They found the poison gave water a pink tint. When the mixture was added to milk, it did not color the milk, but it did leave a small pink residue. For years, Jim Boley had been living a double life with expensive adulterous affairs. Police say when it caught up with him, Boley carefully planned to get rid of Donna and collect enough money to continue his other life. But it didn't work. Medical and forensic science were able to stop him from killing Donna.
You want me to help you?
St. Louis prosecutor Bob McCullough had a strong case.
The charge that we filed, assault in the first degree, is the most serious charge there is, short of death. It carries a punishment of 10 to 30 years or life in prison. In addition to that, we filed an armed criminal action charge because he used poison in order to commit his crime, and that gave the potential of another life sentence.
Jim Boley was found guilty of trying to kill his wife by poisoning. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. St. Louis medical personnel and detectives intervened and saved a woman's life. But tragically, in Ohio, the intervention came too late. Columbus, Ohio lies at the center of America's heartland. In early 1994, the city's police found themselves at the center of a brutal and mysterious case. At 2:51 a.m., police received a frantic 911 call.
Are you with her now?
The caller identified himself as Richard A. He said his wife had just committed suicide. The operator asked him to stay calm and wait for emergency personnel who were on the way.
Sergeant 18-180-181 on a 47. Looks like it's going to be a 43, possible 47.
Columbus Police Department officers arrived at the address. No one was there to meet them. They called out, but there was no response.
Columbus Police! Police! Hello, Columbus Police!
Tentatively, the officers entered the residence.
Got an empty hallway, it's clear. Kitchen's clear.
It looked as if the house was empty. In the master bedroom, Robert A. was at the foot of the bed.
Show me your hands!
He seemed dazed, confused, and unable to move. On the bed, a woman lying on her back with a gunshot wound to the left side of her head.
She's my wife.
A blue steel .38 caliber revolver was resting on her blood-smeared chest.
A?
Aye.
Responding police officers questioned Robert A.
Are you okay, sir?
He told them he went into his bedroom and found his wife. He had no idea what happened.
How much have you had to drink tonight, sir?
Officers noted he appeared to have been drinking.
Drank some beer. How much beer?
I don't know.
Medics were called to the scene. Without disturbing the body, they examined the woman.
It's at 3:03 a.m.
Janet A. was dead.
Radio medics pronounced at 3:03 a.m.
Within minutes, homicide detectives arrived at the house. They are required to investigate any gun-related death. Detectives were briefed by the officers at the scene. Detective Eric Pilya was the lead investigator on the case.
A small, dark-colored revolver was laying on top of her chest, and there was an extensive amount of blood that had come from the wound and run down her body, along her appendages, and pooled in several areas.
The detective interviewed Janet's husband, Robert.
Detective Pilya?
He still appeared to be in shock and was non-responsive.
My first impression of the husband was that he was either extremely distraught to the point of being in shock, or extremely lethargic or drugged, unemotional, just kind of dazed.
When A composed himself, he told investigators earlier that evening he and his wife watched some television after dinner.
Fell asleep?
She was leaving for a business trip to Cincinnati early the next morning. Robert told investigators Janet was nervous about her trip. She was deathly afraid of public speaking.
I have to go to bed. I have to get some rest, okay?
She wanted to get a good night's sleep, so she kissed him goodnight and went upstairs to bed. A said he stayed up a little later and watched a kickboxing movie on television.
So he fell asleep on this couch here. He explained that he had fallen asleep on the couch. He had woke up, decided to go to bed, went upstairs, turned on the light to the bedroom, and found his wife laying there with a gunshot wound to her head. He said that he then went and checked for a pulse.
He was shocked when he found his wife had committed suicide. He had been asleep and didn't even hear the shot. At first glance, the investigation appeared routine. A tragic suicide, a distraught husband left to pick up the pieces of his life. But few investigations are ever routine, and Detective Pilya knew this one would be no different. In Columbus, Ohio, Robert A. woke up to a nightmare. After falling asleep on a couch while watching television, he got up and went upstairs. There, he found his wife, Janet, shot in the head at point-blank range. There was a smear of blood across her chest, and a revolver was next to her hand.
What have you done?
A told detectives Janet was nervous about a business trip she was to take the next day. He feared that might have caused her to take her life.
Then what happened?
A said he kept a gun in the house for self-protection.
I woke up.
He normally
And
kept
I
it under
got
the
up
sofa
and I went
where he had
upstairs.
been sleeping. But it wasn't there.
Do you remember what was
He
on?
said Janet must have taken it earlier or while he was asleep.
Watching a game.
Detective Eric Pilya asked Robert A. what he remembered.
Right here. I asked him, did you touch the body? At first he said no. Then he said, well, I checked for a pulse, and explained that he had been a medic in Vietnam. I asked him specifically how he did that, and he said that he had touched her neck to check for a pulse.
Crime scene investigators photographed the scene, documenting the position of Janet's body, her arms, and the blood swipe across her upper chest. They rearranged her hair to get a better look at the blood pattern. The gun was collected along with other evidence. In searching the room, detectives also noted a flashlight on the dresser. Janet's body was taken to the coroner's office for examination. Officers checked for any signs of forced entry. They found none. At the Franklin County Coroner's Office, the medical examiner swabbed the victim's hands and examined the rest of her body. He took blood samples for a toxicology screening. Janet's head was x-rayed to determine the angle in which she was shot and the path of the bullet. All the physical evidence supported a self-inflicted injury, and the autopsy report classified Janet A.'s death as a suicide. But to the seasoned homicide investigators, something still didn't seem right. Robert A.'s story wasn't adding up.
I made a mental note when he told me that he had turned the light on, that that's not something normal. That seemed abnormal to me, that someone would turn their wife sleeping in bed and they're going to go and turn the light on and wake them up as they're going to bed. That just kind of seemed funny to me at that time.
Investigators decided they needed to find out more about Janet's state of mind.
Okay, that'd be fine. I mean, that's understandable.
They spoke to her parents to see if Janet suffered from depression or was upset about anything. Janet's parents said she was fine. In fact, she had been looking forward to her business trip. The parents' comments didn't seem to support the coroner's findings, according to homicide detective Carl Rankin.
It seemed that Janet A. wasn't a very good candidate for suicide, and that she did in fact have things to look forward to even as soon as the next day.
The detective asked about Janet's relationship with her husband.
Robert A. was insisting to go to Cincinnati also, and the fact that Janet didn't want him to go. They spoke about taking care of the dog, and that Janet A. didn't really feel comfortable even leaving the dog with Robert A.
Janet told her parents Robert had been seeing another woman for several months. Just 3 weeks before her death, Janet said she was planning to divorce him.
She had a dog she loved. She had...
This strengthened investigators' suspicions that Janet A. may not have taken her own life. But they needed proof. So they went back to the crime scene and started from scratch. They re-examined photographs and noted Janet's head wound was on the left side. When they interviewed friends and family members, they discovered that Janet was right-handed. The gun was also positioned very awkwardly in her hand, according to Detective Rankin.
The butt of the gun was facing the opposite way of the hand. The barrel was in fact pointing upward.
This would be a difficult shot for a right-handed person. At the crime lab, toxicology results on Janet's blood came back. It appeared she had taken a massive dose of sleeping pills. Perhaps she had tried to kill herself with pills, and when that didn't work, she got the gun. But there was one problem.
The toxicologist's opinion was that Janet A., after taking that many drugs, would not have been able to form a thought pattern to have been in bed, taken the drugs, gone downstairs, taken a gun out of below the sofa where Robert A. was sleeping, walked back upstairs, gotten back in bed, and shot herself.
Despite trouble in the marriage and a minor domestic incident, detectives had little else.
I'd like to talk to you back here. Okay.
But that changed. Police got a break when a call came in from a woman who said she was the last person to talk to Janet the night she died.
Okay.
The woman was Janet's close friend, but she hadn't come forward because she was afraid of Robert's violent temper. She told police that the night Janet died, she had come over to borrow a dress.
That's nice.
Janet was excited and looking forward to her trip to Cincinnati, and glad to have time away from her husband. On the night Janet died, she called and talked to her friend at 11:30 p.m. She was whispering and said Robert was angry and arguing.
Yes, I was.
He wanted to go on the Cincinnati trip with her, but Janet had refused. The friend told investigators that Janet then abruptly said Robert was coming into the room and she had to go. Janet quickly hung up.
Very violent temper.
It was the last time anyone heard from her.
Not exactly.
Pieces were falling into place. Detectives were now ready to confront Robert A.
You know, we've been wondering about.
They told him they needed the truth
Why would there be
and
a
arranged
flash?
for a polygraph test and asked him to take it.
Why would it be right out on the dresser?
I don't know. I want to talk to my lawyer.
Robert, I don't have any problem with you talking to your attorney.
To prove that Janet's death was not a suicide but cold-blooded murder, detectives needed hard evidence, and that evidence was right in front of them in the crime scene photos.
At that time, it was determined that if we were going to have any substantial evidence out of the blood spatter evidence contained within the photographs, that we were going to have to consider going outside of the department and hiring an individual to take a look at these photographs.
Story of, I don't remember.
Up to this point, detectives' beliefs were just another theory, but the coroner's report was conclusive. If they hoped to reopen this case, they needed a lot more than theory. They needed science to back up their suspicions. Janet A.'s death had been ruled a suicide. But detectives were troubled by the evidence. She was right-handed, but the gun was found near her left hand.
Yeah, I made the call, but you know how it is.
Her husband, Robert A., was the only other person in the house.
They're not there.
Yeah. You know, she had
Friends and
dogs,
family said the couple's marriage was rocky. Weeks before her death, she said she intended to divorce him. Detectives were certain it was murder, and Robert A. was the prime suspect. But to prove their case, they had to turn to a forensic specialist. Columbus police contacted a renowned blood spatter expert. They took the crime scene photographs to Corning, New York, where Professor Herbert McDonald is director of the Laboratory of Forensic Science.
They just objectively wanted me to look at the pictures and see if I could form an opinion based principally on the bloodstain patterns that were present in the pictures.
To Dr. McDonald, something in the pictures didn't make sense.
You can't have a gun after you've shot yourself in the head, fall down on your chest, and then somehow reach up underneath it and smear blood across. It's the sequence is wrong. The obvious thing is it was a homicide and not a suicide. Lying in this position.
It was the information the detectives had been waiting for and the proof they needed. Detectives presented their new findings to the medical examiner. The cause of Janet A.'s death was changed from suicide to undetermined. Detective Carl Rankin presented the evidence.
This is very unusual for a detective to come back in and ask to have something changed on the death certificate, especially something as important as from a suicide to at least undetermined.
The way was cleared to charge Robert A. for Janet's murder.
Robert A.
Detectives discussed their evidence with Franklin County Prosecuting Attorney Jeff Allen.
Once we had Professor McDonald's report, I was convinced that we had a case that we could take to a jury. So that was probably the main factor in my determination that we had a case that we could prosecute.
Elbow.
We could, I think, clearly show, based upon Herb McDonald, the toxicologist, the friends and family members who had had recent contact with Janet A., that the defendant, the only other person in the house, was the person who had shot Janet A. She did not do it herself.
a warrant was issued for Robert A.'s arrest for the murder of his wife. He was taken into custody without incident.
I believe that they'd been arguing. I believe that Robert A. wanted 100% to go to Cincinnati, and he was demanding it.
The couple argued. Janet went up to bed.
Yeah.
She took sleeping pills to get a good night's sleep.
I think Robert A. laid on the couch, drunk, getting in more of a stupor and getting more mad as time went by. And I think Robert A. reached under the couch and he got the gun that he knew was there. The very first interview, he says, "I turned the light on." Well, I don't know about that. I think that he may have even had a flashlight with him to make sure that he didn't make a mistake in what he was about to do. And I think he took that gun, and I believe he walked up the stairs.
After killing Janet A., he put the flashlight on the dresser. Robert repositioned Janet's body. He got blood on his hand, so he wiped it across her upper chest. He planted the gun to make it look like a suicide. But underneath the gun, her blood had already dried.
Without the blood pattern analysis done by Herb McDonnell, without the toxicology, without having as good a crime scene set of photographs as we had, there would have been no reopening of this case, there would have been no trial, and there would have been no conviction.
The jury at Robert A.'s trial heard the forensic evidence. They found him guilty of Janet's murder. He was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Killers go to great lengths to create scenarios that shift blame, leaving behind few traces of their guilt. But no matter how small or well hidden, forensic investigators live to expose these telltale traces and avenge the victims of murderous attraction.